Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, back on Scott's reels again. This one's an interesting one. This is an Olympic. It's a GVO 30. It's a very nice, large-sized reel. The reel, I would say, is comparable to a Daiwa 7000. It's a big one. It's a surf reel. And this one's interesting. It's got kind of a rub to it. I'm not sure what that is, but we're going to try and find out. And in the process, we'll show you how to take this reel apart, how to service it, and how to keep it fishing, giving it a second chance. Well, we're going to start by removing the exterior pieces and parts, and as we do, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. And if you do subscribe to my channel, please use the notification button to see what the upcoming videos are and to choose the ones that you want to watch. I work on all. Here's a vintage surf reel. Next I might be working on a modern low-profile bait caster, a conventional reel. We've just done a couple of conventional reels, lever drags, and so on. And the best way to see that is, of course, by subscribing and hitting the notification. Well, this is a big surf reel, but it doesn't have a lot of drag. If you look at that, that's a very small drag compartment in there, which means that the max drag on this reel is not going to be very good. This container is also very dirty, and we'll show you how to service that towards the end of the video. Right now I'm just going to take two and put them off to the side. And next up, we can usually remove the handle. We're going to look across and we'll find out that the handle has one of these coin slots. It's so that you could kind of do a change if you needed to. I use a big screwdriver, but you could use a coin. It's kind of a circular slot. It's not a flat base slot, but you need to remove this in order to remove the handle. This is what I call a through handle, and it was not uncommon on the reels made in Japan in the late 1970s and 80s, which is when this one was made. With that screw out, you can pull the handle out. And one of the best things I find to do is just put the screw right back in the handle. That way you won't lose it. And then put your pieces into a parts tray like this. Before I do that, I want to take some penetrating oil. This does have an adjustable handle, so I just want to make sure that I soak that in a penetrating oil. And this is the one where if you turn the handle this way, you can collapse the handle. That's what this knob is about, turning and collapsing. So I wanted to make sure that it's clean, that it's lubricated, and that it's capable of doing that. And most of the time, penetrating oil will free it up if it is stuck. Also want to just clean the stuff behind. One of the downfalls of the Japanese-made reels of this era is that the plating wasn't very good, and the plating tends to bubble as it is here, and that's just kind of the way it goes. There's an oil slot for the top of the handle here. We're going to put a little oil in that. We're going to use the penetrating oil at the base, and over time that should free right up and keep that lubricated. Let's move over to the gear side then. I'm going to flip this for a moment. I still have that noise, so I'm just curious what it is. And one of the things you want to do, if you can, make sure that you're in an override for your anti-reverse when you're working on the reel. That way you can be sure that you're not going to get caught up in any problem areas like a gear that comes out and drags the anti-reverse with it. All right, there's 3 case screws. We're going to take those off next. I use a flat-bladed screwdriver for this. Every now and then I get the questions, can you use a mechanical screwdriver? And I don't recommend that. Now, I understand, some folks have weak hands or arthritis or things like that, and they need an assist. That's fine. And more times than not, if you're backing it out, that's not an issue. But when you go in, depending on the type of driver that you have, those things have a lot of torque. And I've seen cases bind and break because folks have used them. So I don't recommend it. If you are going to use it, leave the screw short of being fully tightened before you finish the last little bit off by hand. Otherwise, well, like I said, I've seen broken cases. I've seen binding cases where the gearing doesn't work because of the over-tightening conditions. One of the things I like to do, I like to take the screws out, put them on my workbench, and make sure that all of those screws are the same length, same circumference or diameters of the threads, and so on. These three are the same, so it doesn't matter when we go to reinstall where they go. And of course, one of the things I like to do as well is to take pictures. I'm using a video camera, but I recommend that you take pictures along the way so that as you get to critical points, like right now, when you open up the case, you'll be able to see what's going on in there, and more importantly, have a guide for when it's time to reinstall. I'm looking here, it looks like we've got a lot of buildup here, and it also looks like we got a lot of dirt and the like in the case itself. You can see that here. I'm thinking maybe, just maybe, we've got this grinding going on. It's the result of just kind of making its way, sort of sloshing through the dirt here as that revolves around. You can see in here. And I'm thinking maybe that's the cause. We'll find out. We may be able to pinpoint it. It may be something obvious, but then maybe not. And maybe just a good thorough cleaning is what's going to solve this issue. All right, I've cleaned up what I can here. There is some tarnish on the case. You can't clean tarnish, but you can clean the dirt, and that's kind of what we were shooting for here. And this case is a bushing. This is a bushing. There is no bearing on this side. The advertisement on here is ball bearing, and that is correct. It's singular, and it has one ball bearing. So there's other ones out there that have done 2 ball bearings. That would be like the Daiwa 7000 series. And there's some that have no ball bearings, like a Zebco reel. Regardless of what you have, if you clean it up, it will work as it was advertised to do. That case goes into my parts tray, and next up we want to remove that axle shaft, and to do that we want to back the axle shaft all the way down so that we have access to the screw and the cross block that's holding that axle shaft. That's a flat bladed screw, and once we remove that we'll be able to pull the axle shaft up and over and remove the gearing. So again, I lay that on my table. I'm going to remove the axle shaft. And a fun thing to do just to not lose that screw. And I don't think I would lose it too much on this particular reel, but sometimes you get a lot of reels with a lot of pieces and parts, and you just don't start trusting your memory any longer. So if you just kind of put the screw in there to hold it separate, put that in your parts tray, you're better. All right, now I should be able to remove that main gear. Remove the crosswind block, and we should be able to remove this crosswind gear. And again, look at the dirt in here, and look at the rut that crosswind gear has kind of run in there, and maybe that's the noise. So one of the ways, we're just kind of doing a process of elimination here. Let's spin the rotor without those parts, and we don't have that grating noise, right? It's just spinning nicely. So we're going to say that it was in the lower part of this case, and most likely, yeah, look at the overabundance of dried grease on this main gear, and that'll kind of tell you that the issue is the resistance it's running into from all this old grease and dirt. At least that's a hypothesis. I guess we'll find out when we put it all back together again if that's the truth, but you can just see it's all kind of loaded up here. And again, we want to do our best. I'm using cotton swabs. Just want to do our best to mop that up and get that out of there as a way to try and do it. And I'm noticing, it's kind of hard to see on here probably, but I'm noticing that the texture on this is a little sandy, and not quite sure where the reel was fishing. This is one that Scott got from a flea market. And of course, when you're buying from a flea market, sometimes you're buying it from the owner, and they can give you all the history in the world, tell you, you know, back in 1985 I bought this thing and used to fish it hard and blah, blah, blah. Or you may get nothing. It may just be somebody who went to an estate sale and bought a bunch of reels, and, well, You don't get the history with those, right? I guess that's those things with antiques when they say, what's the provenance to it, right? Well, sometimes you're going to learn, sometimes you don't. Chris has told me as he buys reels on eBay that he quite often engages the eBay seller, and if the eBay seller is the original owner, they typically know the story, and he notes that in his collection. And sometimes, well, they're just kind of passing it on or selling it for a friend, and they really don't have that information. Well, that case looks an awful lot better with just a little bit of effort. So let's do the rest of it. We're going to clean up the back of the oscillation gear. We're going to check the teeth. Now, I just had a Penn 6500 Spin Fisher 6500 version 5, and I was getting ready to install a reel in the bag project. Notice one of the teeth here was out of alignment. It was pressed up against the other one. Well, that's no way to reinstall. I have to go get the replacement part on that. That one's cleaned. You'll notice I wear a glove. I do try to keep as much of this stuff, we'll just say it's old grease, but there's other stuff in here. I like to do my best to keep that off my hands if possible. And you can see it does its job. There's quite a bit there that's kind of laying around. Well, if you have a question on this reel or any reel in particular, a process to go repair something, maybe you're in the middle of a repair and you got stuck, maybe you can't quite figure out how it comes together or apart, well, if you want to leave that in the comments section, that's the best way to get a response from me. I know folks have tried calling the number on the business card in the end, and I try to be straightforward with everybody. That's one of the harder ways to reach me. But if that's your only choice, then leave a voice message if I don't answer. Don't be surprised if I don't answer. And, well, I'll try and get back to you when I can. That phone is not monitored all the time, and when I'm in the shop like I am now, I'm not answering the phone. I'm obviously doing a video, or in some cases I just can't put a project down, and that's not by design. It's just kind of the way it works, and I apologize to you if that's something that has gotten in the way of your repairs. But leave the questions in the comments section, and I will try to do my best to answer them. Well, that looks a whole lot better in just a short period of time. And now what we want to do is we want to grab a hard brush. Bristle brush is okay. Toothbrush is fine. Pull it through all of the teeth on the main gear. And then inspect the teeth now. Make sure that they're all uniform, that they're not broken or scarred or anything. Look on the back. Make sure that the teeth on the back, which you're going to drive the oscillation gear, you got to do the same thing here. Make sure that they're all uniform. Check it from both sides. Make sure that the points are even. Every now and then you're going to find one of these main gears that are warped. So you'll see high points and then you'll see them ground down. You need to just check that, particularly when you get a reel like this, which was making a little bit of noise. You're not quite sure where that noise is coming from. You're not quite sure if you've solved it, but you want to do your best to understand if you've eliminated most of the conditions and if you did your best to try and repair the reel. As you go on the back end of this, make sure that you lather up that back side, which is going to go into the case as a bushing. So we've seen two things so far. We've seen the case as a bushing on both sides. There's got to be one up here then, because it's advertising a ball bearing. So that's most likely here. And let's see what we have for a nut. Well, it's probably a 13 millimeter, and you're going to want to use a deep socket here. You're not going to be able to reach that nut with it's going to be a 13. You're not going to be able to reach that with your basic open-end box wrench. It's not going to work. It's too deep. There we go. All right. I keep my socket wrench close by, not because I was anticipating needing it on this one, but it just, it's nice to not have to put the reel down when you're in the middle of a repair to try and go find the piece that you need. Once you break the screw, I like to take it off by hand. That way I won't scar the pinion gear underneath. I'm going to wipe that down because that's got a little bit of dirt in it too. and we'll see what's going on underneath here. Well, we've got a ramp that's loaded with dried grease. We have an anti-reverse that's loaded with dried grease. Well, you've seen this act before. We're just going to use our penetrating oil. Let that sit for a minute. We'll come over to the main side of this. And what we want to do here is make sure that it's cleaned of any dirt and debris. I'm going to wipe that down. Wipe that down. I noticed as I just did that, well, there's a little shim washer in here. And so we know that's going to go on top of the bearing before we reinstall. I'll go right in my parts tray for a minute. We've got a collar that's holding on your pinion gear and shaft, so that'll be nice. Let's give a wipe there. You can see how quickly that penetrating oil works. It just cleans it right up. And I use that most times for my degreasing. It's oil-based. I don't have to worry about any acids and the chemicals in some of these modern cleaners. And I've been doing it for a while, and it seems to be the one that I prefer. So there you go. You may have other products that you like. I'm not going to discourage you from using them, but I find that penetrating oil is a very good one for me. Just like we did before with the case screws, I'm taking the 3 of these out so that I can remove the collar. And what that's doing is that's holding this assembly in place inside your body. If you didn't have this collar on there, well, you'd go to reel in a fish, and the rotor and the strength of the fight of the fish would pull this whole assembly right out. So Scott continues to find these nice reels for, well, relatively inexpensively, and I think that's pretty much a statement on these Olympic reels. The market really hasn't caught up with them. The prices on these, the Daiwa 7000s and the like, they're going up crazy. I think you still have a good bargain in these Olympics. With that removed, we should be able to remove this. Kind of famous last words, right? We're going to soak this in the penetrating oil. And we're going to take the rotor without that cap and reinstall that. And we're going to use that as a kind of a knob to pull up on that assembly. There's things you learn over time. If you're having trouble removing them, this is generally a good way to do that. Just tighten it down, and you can kind of use it more with some leverage here where you couldn't grab it the other way. Oh, there we go. All right, so if you got that little trick, put that one in your kit bag and use it another day. A little bit of penetrating oil. Use the rotor as a knob. Pull up and out, and you've got it. Notice on the back side here, there is this little trip lever for your anti-reverse. It's only going to be a single step anti-reverse. When that comes around one time, this hook is going to lodge in here, and that's how you will get your anti-reverse working. So don't expect a multiple step anti-reverse. It's not going to happen on this reel. All right, let's go ahead and take this off now. Remember your sequence here. That's the padded washer. It's going down so that it gives you a little bit of room. And also remember, we're going to have that little brass washer that we found underneath that's going to go on top of the bearing. Bearing comes out. Let's oil that. I oil bearings. Just going to flood it. And let's do the same thing with the pinion gear here that we did with the oscillation gear and the main gear. Use that brush. Use the penetrating oil. I got some pieces and parts on my table here that I would much prefer to put in my parts tray there, but well, I'm into it now, right? And I know I left them there because I was thinking, well, I'm going to get right back to this. Well, if the phone rings, if you get an emergency, if something happens, these little things tend to fly away, and well, you wind up in trouble. So that's something that you want to avoid at all costs. So you probably should move these over and out of harm's way. Okay, just pause there to reset the camera. Let's go ahead and grease the pinion gear. Please use fishing reel grease. I use Penn Precision Reel grease. I don't have a preference one way or another. This one just comes in pound containers, so I use it. But whatever you select, please make sure it's a grease for fishing reels. I just came across one I was doing, and it was all lubricated up with some kind of graphite. And well, I went through a couple of gloves, and I was happy that I was wearing those gloves, because what a mess. And you know, graphite might be good for door locks, but there's better products out there for fishing reels, and it involves fishing reel grease. Please use that. Here's that little washer we used, and we can take that whole piece and put that back in. That's a tight fit. I don't know if we've got a swollen bearing or if we've got what the real issue is here. There we go. But regardless, there we go. It's nice and flush now, and that's what you needed. Take your plate, that's the collar or the tie down. Line those screws up. There's 3 of them. Take your time. Those of you that know me and know these little screws know it's going to be time to take. So if you want to go by and get some beverage of choice, go right ahead and do that. I'll probably still be here picking these little screws up and trying to get them in position. Those screws are kind of hard to hold. Trying to use some grease to do that. There we go. Well, no harm, no foul. So this is the golden era of the Japanese beginning to offshore or accept offshore manufacture. You had Olympic, you had Ryobi, you had Daiwa, you had Shimano coming into their own, and had a lot of contract manufacturers in there as well. Seiko, which was the watchmaker, became the Daiwa group. Some of the first ones you'll find are Daiwa Seiko reels. And every one of these is dependable. That's why I said some of these are getting sought after real quickly, like the early Shimanos. They're over $100 now. And Daiwa C Series, Silver Series is doing just fine, thank you very much. Some of them are not as sought after yet, but I think they will be over time. And that's a good time for you to kind of pick some of these up like Scott did at a flea market. You just saw me, I put some oil in the seams for the bail. The bail's working fine. If it's working fine, you do not need to take the bail off and complicate life. All right, this is going to go back on then. There's 2 flat sides to that pinion gear. If you hold the pinion gear steady, find the flat sides, kind of eyeball it up there. Got a little bit of dirt left in that channel there, so we'll go ahead and get that. And hopefully when we get done with all of this, we're not going to have that rub that I think was all that grease just kind of rubbing on each other. But we're going to find out. Start it by hand, much as you can. Now this wasn't making a noise, we know that when we tested it, but let's go ahead and make sure that we tighten this down. Give it a spin. We know that wasn't making the noise before, so we don't have to worry about it now. You can also get the trip on your bail, make sure that that's working at this point. Well, it's time to get working backwards now, putting things on instead of taking them off. I'm going to start by getting a good amount of grease onto the back side of your oscillation gear, into the teeth, to the side, the stud, and on the face. This one gets grease everywhere. It's a critical point in the performance of this reel. Next up then is your crosswind block. The only things that are going to contact movable parts is the back side. You don't need to grease the front side. Then we can put our main gear in. Oops, I got a little bit of dirt on the front end of this main gear. Hate to go through all of this to find out that's the dirt that's been making the noise. Right, we've already greased the back side, so let's go ahead and put that in. Merge that into your oscillation gear. Leave the hole down low on your oscillation block so that you can put the axle shaft in. Go ahead and grab that axle shaft. If we haven't done it already, let's make sure we wipe it nice and clean. And when you go to lube this, it's just a very fine coat. You can even put oil on this. If you put anything more than that on there, when you go through the pinion gear here, it's such tight tolerance, you can see that it's just going to scrape off any excess grease that you may have put on there. And well, maybe years from now when the next person goes to service this, it's going to be, what in the world happened here? And why do we have all this dried grease? And the answer would be, well, you have all that dried grease because somebody put too much of it on to begin with. This is an interesting reel in that it's using a flat-bladed screws for most of these. Most of the time you're going to find that these are Phillips head screws. Not the case here. Alrighty. And we're going to just put a little bit of grease on the shaft here. Again, that's going to go inside the bushing on this case. Let's turn around, put that case back on. There's a stud that's going to mesh in here. Make sure that you get those aligned. So there's actually 3 holes for the screws, and there's 1 stud that lines up in the case. Don't miss the stud. We know that we took these out. They're all the same, so it doesn't matter which hole you're going to put those in now. Let's go ahead and do that. And tighten them down with your flat-bladed screwdriver. Well, if I work on a lot of reels, if you have a reel that you haven't seen me work on, and you would like me to work on it, please leave a request in the comments section. If I have it in my library, and I know some folks don't search the library all the time, but if I have it in my library, I'll point you to where I did one or did one similar. And if I don't have it in my library and I find one in my shop, or I find one come into my shop, I put a kind of a wait list or a to-do list, if you will, and when one shows up, I will certainly try to do that for you. And if you're having a particular problem with a reel that you can't find a video on, leave that comment in there as well. And again, sometimes it's a more general problem, like this one's a general problem, right? You got the sound of a grinding going on. That's not particular to this reel, that's particular to, well, anything that kind of get grease choked. And if you leave that comment in there, I'll try to walk you through what I think the issues are. And we can go from there. But they're all tight. Before I go much further, then I just want to grab a kitchen scrubby, and well, I'm going to use Pen Rod and Wheel Cleaner here. Yeah, I'm not paid by Penn or anybody. I just recommend products that work for me. You can find a lot of different products. You can have your own preferences. Go ahead. There's more than one product out there that's totally acceptable. I like this one. It cleans up nicely. And kind of a polish and a cleaner in this one. It works great on rods too, particularly if you get a lot of dirt and debris on your rods, fish scales, things like that. It'll help take it off. And I always recommend using it with a kitchen scrubby or a soft cloth. It's not, you don't need to get abrasive with these to do the scrubbing. And in a lot of cases, a reel like this, you're not going to be able to clean up the corrosion and the blistering on the paint. That's beyond a kitchen scrubby, that's for sure. But it will help pretty up and beautify whatever it is that can be addressed by a cleaning. All right. I'm seeing there's a little bit on that case on too. We can do that. Let's go over to the underwhelming drag system in this one. Again, I mentioned there's a lot of dirt in here, so the way to service your drag is to take a pick or a small screwdriver or something, work it into the channel, hold your finger over this now. There's a C-clip in there, and you're going to want to remove that C-clip. And if you don't hold it, sometimes that's under a lot of pressure, and well, it's just going to shoot out. We're going to find Teflon washers in here, I think. Yep, there's Teflon washers in here. There's a cap washer, and there's a little kind of a collar washer below. So always important to notice the sequence on that. And here's what you need to do. You need to clean that cavity out because that's got dirt in it. And dirt is the enemy of a drag washer. If you get dirt in there, it's either going to grind it down, or in some cases, it's going to block the performance of it. And, well, you're going to have an ineffective drag system. All right. Why does this get all that dirt in there? Well, this is a top drag. As you're fishing, your line is wrapping around the outside of this spool. You only have this little guy here. The water is going to settle. It's coming off the line. It's going to splash into this bowl. It has nowhere to go. So it's going into your drag washers. So if you wonder why you're all dirty there, that's why. There's a hard red fabric washer that goes first. And then there's this little spring or tension washer. It was facing up. I noticed that when I took this off, so we're going to go put that in next. Then we've got a series of metal and Teflon washers. Okay, I just took time to lay this out for you. After you put that little flexible washer in, clean that clip off, you're going to back that up with a flat metal washer, which is a keyed washer. Then your first of your Teflon washers. Then the pointed one, or the eared washer, that goes in the slots. And you may need a pick to kind of rotate that around to get it seated properly. Then your last of your Teflon washers. And then your silver top washer, which is also a keyed washer. And now we want to find the groove or the inset ridge inside the spool. Put one side in, and sometimes you can do this by hand strength. Sometimes you can't. But regardless, if you don't have the hand strength, kind of use an assist from pliers or something, but then make sure that you're seated into that ridge just like that. Once you do that, then let's grab the spool, insert the axle shaft, bring it all the way down. Use that adjuster button now to tighten it down. When you're tight, make sure that the spool is holding, and then back it off. You don't need to leave the tension on the drag washers. It will lead to premature wear and compression. Well, this is the moment we've been waiting for. Did we solve that little grinding noise? Well, we sure did. Remember, we've left this in the off position for the anti-reverse. Flip your switch here. And now you've got your anti-reverse back. So there you go. Make sure to touch your bail. And that's it. That is your Olympic GVO 30 large saltwater reel circa the late 1970s, early 1980s, and one that can go fishing for a long time to come. So I hope you've enjoyed that. If you did, please like it. If you want to see more, again, please subscribe. To our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for everything it is that you do to keep us safe. To everyone, please enjoy the holiday season. Take some well-deserved time to enjoy the families. And to everybody, have a great day, a great weekend, and wherever you are, please stay safe. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.